In a world where relationships are breaking apart faster than they are being built, where divorce rates are climbing every single year, where men and women are growing further apart from each other despite being more connected than ever before, there is one relationship that stands as the most complete and most beautiful example of how a husband and wife should treat each other. And that example was lived out 1400 years ago by the greatest human being who ever walked this earth. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, not in a book, not in a theory, in his daily life, in his home, in the small moments and the difficult moments and the tender moments that his companions witnessed and preserved for us, so that we could learn from them today. And what you are about to hear will not just change the way you think about marriage. It will change the way you think about what love actually means. Subscribe to this channel right now, because every week we bring you reminders like this one that will change your life. Let us start with something the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said directly. He said, "The best of you are those who are best to their wives, and I am the best of you to my wives." He did not say the best of you are those who pray the most. He did not say the best of you are those who fast the most or give the most charity. He said the best of you are those who are best to their wives. And then he backed that statement up with his entire life. Every single day, in every interaction, in every small gesture, he showed us what those words actually look like when they are lived. The first thing that strikes you when you study the Prophet's relationship with his wives is how deeply he listened to them. Not the kind of listening where you wait for the other person to finish so you can say what you were already going to say. Real listening, present listening, the kind where the other person feels that what they are saying actually matters. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, the wife who spent more time with him than anyone else and knew him more intimately than almost any other person, described how he would sit with her and she would tell him stories from before Islam, stories about the days of ignorance, and he would listen to her with full attention and engage with what she was saying. He was the leader of an entire community. He was receiving revelation from Allah. He was managing wars and treaties and the affairs of thousands of people. And he would sit with his wife and listen to her stories, because he understood something that most men never learn. That feeling heard is not a small thing. It is one of the deepest human needs. And a wife who feels heard by her husband has something that no wealth can replace. And then there is the story of Khadijah. May Allah be pleased with her, his first wife, the woman who was there before everything. When the first revelation came, and the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, ran back to her trembling and overwhelmed, and not knowing what had just happened to him, he did not go to his companions. He did not go to the scholars of the time. He ran to his wife. He said, "Cover me, cover me." And Khadijah wrapped him in a blanket and held him. And then, when the trembling subsided, she said something to him that is one of the most beautiful things any human being has ever said to another. She said, "By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your relatives. You help the poor and the destitute. You serve your guests generously. You assist those who are afflicted by calamities." She was describing his character to him. She was reminding him of who he was at the moment when he most needed to hear it. And years later, long after Khadijah had passed away, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, would still speak of her with such love and such gratitude that Aisha once said she never felt more jealous of any woman than she felt of Khadijah, even though she had never met her. Because when he spoke her name, his entire face changed. He remembered Khadijah. He honored her memory. He would send gifts to her friends. He would slaughter an animal and make sure her friends received a portion. Love that outlives death. Loyalty that does not end when the person is no longer present. That is what the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, showed us about what a husband's heart should look like. Now let us talk about something that most people never associate with greatness. Housework. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, used to help in the household chores. Aisha was asked what the Prophet used to do in his house, and she said he used to keep himself busy serving his family, and when it was time for prayer, he would go for the prayer. He was not sitting waiting to be served. He was not treating his home as a place where he rested while his wife worked. He was in the house helping, fixing things, serving his family. And then when the call to prayer came, he would go and lead the entire Muslim community in prayer. The same hands that led armies and received revelation were the hands that helped around the house, because he understood that a man who honors the work of his home honors his wife, and a man who treats domestic work as beneath him has understood nothing about what it means to be a partner. And then there is the way he spoke to his wives. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had a nickname for Aisha. He called her Aish, a shortened, affectionate version of her name, something private between them, something that belonged only to their relationship. He was not cold and formal with her. He was warm, he was playful, he was tender. He used to race with Aisha. The Prophet of Allah, the leader of the Muslims, would race with his wife on foot in the desert. And Aisha narrated that she beat him one time when she was young and slender, and then years later, when she had put on weight, he beat her and he smiled and said, "This one is for that one." He was laughing with her, competing with her, playing with her. Because joy in a marriage is not a luxury. It is a necessity. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, knew that a wife who laughs with her husband has something in her heart that protects the marriage from 1,000 different threats. He also used to drink from the same spot on a cup that Aisha drank from. A small thing, an almost invisible thing, but Aisha noticed it and remembered it and told others about it decades later. Because when someone loves you, they pay attention to the small things. They seek out the small moments of connection. They do not save their tenderness for the big occasions. They bring it into the ordinary Tuesday afternoon and the quiet evening and the unremarkable moments that add up to a life. And then there is the way he handled disagreement, because no marriage is without conflict. No two people who live together will agree on everything. And how a man behaves when there is tension in his home reveals his true character more than almost anything else. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, never struck any of his wives. Never, not once, in all the years of all his marriages. He said in a hadith, "How does one of you beat his wife as he beats a camel and then embrace her at the end of the day?" He was speaking with complete disbelief that a man could justify raising his hand against the woman he shares his life with. And he went further than just not hurting them physically. He protected them emotionally as well. When he saw that one of his wives was upset or distressed, he would not dismiss her feelings. He would not tell her she was being unreasonable. He would sit with her in her distress and stay present until she felt better. There is a narration about a time when Safiya, one of his wives, was crying. He asked her what was wrong. She told him that someone had called her a daughter of a Jew in a disparaging way. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, did not brush it aside. He did not say it is not a big deal. He said, "You should have said my father is Aaron, and my uncle is Moses, and my husband is Muhammad." He defended her honor. He elevated her. He gave her words that would make her feel not diminished, but dignified. A husband who gives his wife dignity in the moments when others try to take it from her is a husband whose wife will never forget what she has. And perhaps the most profound thing about the Prophet's treatment of his wives is how he treated them in front of others. He did not have one face in public and another in private. He did not pretend to honor his wives when people were watching and then treat them differently when no one was looking. What you saw was what was there. And he spoke about his wives publicly with love and with respect. He acknowledged their contributions. He credited them openly. When Aisha's father Abu Bakr came to complain about her one time, the Prophet stood between them and said, "Whatever you want to say to her, say it to me first." He placed himself between his wife and anyone who might harm her, even her own father. That is what protection looks like. Not just physical protection, the protection of standing up for her, of saying her name with honor, of making sure the people around her know that she is valued and respected and that her husband will not allow anyone to diminish her. He also consulted his wives. This is a man who consulted the most experienced military minds of his time on matters of war and strategy. And he also consulted his wives. On the day of Hudaybiyah, when his companions were confused and reluctant to follow a command, it was Salama, his wife, who gave him the advice that resolved the entire situation. And he listened to her. He acted on what she said. And it worked. Because wisdom does not have a gender. And a man who is secure enough in himself to take advice from his wife is a man whose marriage will always have depth. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The most complete of the believers in faith are those with the best character, and the best of you are those who are best to their women." He said this more than once, in more than one hadith, because he wanted it understood, because he knew that the way a man treats the woman who trusts him with her life is the truest measure of who he is. Anyone can be good when it costs nothing. Anyone can be kind to strangers and colleagues and people they are trying to impress. But the person you are in your own home, in the quiet moments, in the difficult moments, in the moments when no one is watching and nothing is at stake, that is the real person. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was the same person in his home that he was in the masjid. The same gentleness, the same patience, the same love. So here is what I want you to carry from this video. If you are a husband, look at your marriage today and ask yourself honestly, does my wife feel heard? Does she feel protected? Does she feel that I bring warmth into her daily life and not just provision? Does she know that I would stand between her and anything that tries to diminish her? Because the Sunnah is not just in the prayer and the fasting. The Sunnah is in how you speak to her in the morning. It is in whether you help around the house. It is in the nickname you have for her. It is in the cup you drink from after she drinks. It is in the race you run together in the small moments of an ordinary life. And if you are a woman listening to this, know that this is what Allah intended for you. This is the standard, not the lowest bar of a man who does not hit you. The highest bar of a man who races with you and listens to your stories and defends your honor and remembers you long after you are gone. Do not accept less than what the best human being who ever lived showed us is possible. May Allah bless every marriage with the love and the mercy He described in His book. May He make our homes places of ghalab and warmth and genuine partnership. And may He make us all worthy of the kind of love that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, showed us is possible between a husband and a wife. Amen.